Commission will come to order. Good evening, everybody. Good to see everyone. We will proceed with introductions. I'll start. My name is Nick Neptune, Chair of the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Commission.
Joe Caruso, Vice Chair and Chair of the Policy Committee.
Elizabeth Alley, I'm on the Policy Committee.
Jeronica Goodwin, first time, not sure what committee yet.
Welcome, Ms. Goodwin. Everyone, please welcome our newest addition.
Pierre Tong, I'm on the Planning Committee.
Beverly Clark, the representative from the Parks, Greenway, and Recreation Advisory Board.
Tammy Stern, I'm on the Planning Committee.
Mary Jo Gellenbeck, Planning Committee.
Brian Thomas, I'm on the Outreach Committee.
Celeste Bravo Taylor on the Planning Committee.
Thank you, everyone. We'll now proceed with an approval of the minutes from our previous meeting. I hope everyone's had a moment to at least take a look, take a review. I know I can always trust Commissioner Thomas to be quite thorough in his review of our minutes. Do I have a motion to approve our minutes from our previous meeting? Again, as I have come to learn and trust, Commissioner Thomas.
I did read them, but I just picked it. This says BPAC retreat meeting minutes, and I want to make sure that's not what we mean there. I think that's just a regular meeting, right? Okay. So I'd be happy to motion to approve these minutes with that one amendment.
Do I hear a second to Commissioner Thomas's motion? A second from Ms. Bravo Taylor. And all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, the minutes from the previous meeting, given Commissioner Thomas's amendment, have been approved. We now have public comment. Do we have anyone from our public? Oh, I think I see Miss Sarah Ellis ready to approach with a public comment. Miss Ellis?
Oh, good evening. Thank you very much for having me. My name is Sarah Ellis. I'm the Interim Executive Director of Oaks and Spokes, P.O. Box 28726, Raleigh, North Carolina, 27611. I'm here to address the Commission about a matter that I just sent y'all an email about, so it's fresh in your inboxes. But there is a piece in the traffic ordinance that has been concerning to us, and it came to our attention recently, so we wanted to bring it to the attention of the Commission. The traffic schedule section number 26, bike lanes, allows for unrestricted parking in bike lanes along Anderson Drive, Faircloth Street, Lassiter Mill, and Ridge Road. This ordinance is unsafe and it puts our most vulnerable road users at risk, and we also feel it's incongruent with the 2030 Comprehensive Plan and the city's complete street policies. So we would like to kindly ask the Commission to consider this item and consider the safety of those road users. Thank you very much, and also y'all have my email, so please reach out with any questions. I'm happy to discuss.
Thank you, Ms. Ellis. Any questions, thoughts, response from the Commission? Colleagues from city staff, any response, any thoughts?
I'd like to respond and just support, I'd like to support Oaks and Spokes' efforts to protect the bike lanes, whether they be only painted lines, but that every time that I have heard from families in the past their concerns for safe routes to school, because the bike lanes are filled with leaves and parked cars, causing families with small children to enter the roadway. And with most of our roadways being at 35 miles per hour or faster, is a really big concern for me. So thank you, Sarah, for bringing it to our attention.
Thank you, Ms. Gellenbeck. Mr. Ritchie?
Staff can look into it and provide a report at the next meeting.
Thank you. Ms. Ellis, thank you again for your continued advocacy on behalf of our cycling and pedestrian community.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you.
Any further comment from the public? Hearing none, I believe that we shall proceed with our agenda. Up first is a presentation on the Bus Rapid Transit Station Area Planning. And if I'm not mistaken, we have Ms. Bynum here with us to present.
Hi, Mr. Nick. Hey, everybody. I'm Bynum Walter. I manage comprehensive planning for the city of Raleigh, and it's a treat to be here with you tonight. It's exciting to talk to people that are not the council at the table. Thank you for the variety in my work life. I appreciate it. So I want to just give you a very high level of where things stand with station area planning in our BRT corridors right now. So we have two projects gearing up. stationary planning for the western and the southern corridor. And just a reminder, I feel like you are expert users who would be aware of this, but western corridor runs west from downtown out along Western Boulevard, includes a new piece of alignment for western and goes on into Cary. And then the southern corridor similarly runs south down to Garner. And again, there's a little new piece of, oh wow, I never got it to do that before, a new piece of alignment there as well. Western is, I believe, in 30% design, and southern is roughly in 10% design. So we're coordinating with Raleigh Transportation Transit staff on both projects as we move along. Stationary planning goals for us in the western and southern corridors. The very first goal is to improve first last mile connections and bicycle and pedestrian safety. We know that those connections for folks to get on the bus and off the bus and where they're going really matter. We're looking at efforts to align land use and urban design guidance within the station areas. Also looking to initiate business support and stabilization efforts in both corridors. Both of these are very rich with locally independently owned businesses. And that's an important part of what makes those places unique to Raleigh and special to Raleigh. And then also looking at identifying affordable housing and anti-displacement options in both corridors. So Western Boulevard has a remarkable inventory of existing naturally occurring affordable housing. The corridor proper of the southern corridor is not tracked in any of the data sources we use as having as much affordable housing, but we know that it's there just a little bit farther out the corridor. So important in both of these corridors. And we've had good luck good success working with housing and neighborhoods in the Newbern Avenue corridor. Lots of projects in the pipeline there. Not as many on the go in either of these, and so really looking for opportunities for partnership for housing and neighborhoods with developers and providers in both of these corridors, because we know that in addition to that naturally occurring resource, we also need legally bound units that are held in perpetuity. Reminder that we have already applied the transit overlay district in these two corridors via city-initiated rezoning. This was objective, criteria-based. We mapped a lot of overlay out here, and the city-initiated request for Newbern Avenue is currently in place. So council asked us to be proactive and map overlay in these two corridors to preserve land capacity. And then we held off on Newbern because we were getting ready to go through the stationary process there. And so we had the benefit of the stationary planning process in making the recommendations in Newbern. So the difference you see, like in Newbern, there are use and height and frontage changes in addition to just simply mapping the overlay. I can imagine we would see some of that more nuanced recommendation for rezoning coming out of stationary planning for Western and Southern. As I mentioned, this is in adoption phase. The Planning Commission, we're going to have our first neighborhood meeting for the rezoning next week, for the city-initiated rezoning next week, and we'll bring the stationary planning report and comprehensive plan amendments along with the rezoning to Planning Commission probably, I hope, early next year. So that's what's going on there. And if you want to help us promote those, that would be welcome. We're really trying to get the word out. There's been so much going on in the Newbern corridor for so long. I think we have experienced a little fatigue there. And sometimes people aren't really sure, oh, wait, should I pay attention now? I feel like this is a good time. Yeah. Western and Southern, we are going to be issuing a joint RFQ for those projects at once. We could hire one firm to help us do both projects, multiple firms to help us do one or the other project. We're also coordinating with the town of Cary on the Western corridor project, and we have federal grant funding to help support that particular corridor's effort. Cary hasn't done any stationary planning yet. They are they're babies. They're learning their way, and they're moving a little bit slowly. So we're kind of waiting on them. But I'm hoping we will move forward before the end of the year to issue an RFQ for those projects. And right around the time we do that, we would probably also start recruiting for community leader group for both projects, as well as community connectors to help us with engagement. So if, I don't know if you all are, we have used this community leader group model before. We solicit input. Council, staff makes a recommendation, council appoints. Those folks are volunteers. They meet with us regularly to help inform the process and make sure that we aren't like so deep in planner jargon that no one understands us. And then we also hire part-time community connectors to help us get the word out, right? We find that the community responds to each other very well. So we'll be recruiting folks to help us with both of those projects. And just a little bit about schedule, if you are so inclined, interested in. We did do a pre-RFQ survey asking the community to advise us about questions they would like for us to ask the consultant as part of the selection process. We have done this before. It actually has really been really helpful. The questions that people want to hear answered, and then the things that consultants say in response to those questions has been incredibly illustrative of how relationships might go. It's been really interesting. So we have done that in the past with good effect, and we typically just put those straight in the RFQ and ask for written response to those. And so we get a good kind of common level of preparedness from the responders. So hopefully selection early next year, some listening sessions in the community. Those would be mostly low stakes, no stakes events with food, which is kind of a new model for us, but that kind of introductory no stakes environment is really valuable for us in meeting people and establishing relationships, and then work in earnest through summer, fall of next year, and wrapping up right about this time next year, hopefully. What questions could I answer for you about stationary planning in any of the corridors? Anything anybody would like to hear about?
So is this timeline, is this just for the southern and western, or does this include New Bern? How does New Bern fit in? Is this a separate, or what are we talking
So New Bern
about timeline?
stationary planning is concluded.
Okay.
We presented that to council in June, and we are in the process of implementing some of the recommendations from that process, which is the city-initiated rezoning.
Okay.
And so that the rezoning and the actual adoption of the stationary planning documents will come to Planning Commission for consideration probably early next year. So that's all ahead of Western and Southern. Like New Bern was the first one, went first. They jumped in the pool first. And so then Western and Southern, we're issuing this RFQ hopefully by the end of the year, and that process will play out over the next 12 months.
Okay. So as far as New Bern, I guess so we broadly understand, what are kind of the remaining general steps to get to kind of starting construction or the next kind of major phase? Because I think we've kind of been hearing a lot in the community that there's been quite a lot of planning effort and construction hasn't started yet. I think people kind of want to know when shovels are going to be in the ground.
Right. That's a great question that I can't answer specifically.
Right.
What is that? What'd you say?
Survey flags are up, so.
Yeah, I mean, I know there's right-of-way acquisition happening right now for a multi-use path, but that is, as I understand it, a little bit separate from the actual BRT construction. Remember, we didn't actually need any additional right-of-way there. I think the hope is still that BRT is operational in New Bern Corridor, I think by 25.
Okay.
Is that Transportation Friends? Does that sound true?
So
I love how none of them are jumping in to help me.
No, in line with the FTA funding, so they have to be in revenue service, so the buses have to be running by the end of '25. And so that's where the schedule is right now. We're anticipating being in construction late spring, summer next year.
Okay. And then just as far as Southern and Western, we go through this process, like I guess, just to clarify what you mentioned, we've kind of done the initial rezoning, which is kind of a base level of, changes. And then I guess the idea is that once this process comes back, we will do a subsequent city-initiated rezoning with kind of more detailed.
There may be.
Yeah. More.
I'm not really advocating for a particular outcome on rezoning recommendations for either one of those without having done the work.
Right.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
I have a question, may I? How long has the New Bern section been in progress? Just to gauge how long the western and southern ones will.
So if I'm remembering correctly, the ratings application would have been in 2020.
So 5 years is a time frame for these new lines to be up and running?
It can be. Certainly, I think there's been a lot of lessons learned on New Bern. I will say that the Southern Corridor has been submitted for the FTA ratings application. Western is actually going to be a year behind on that. So in terms of looking at it from that time frame as your starting point, I think that's typically, I'm not familiar with the details of the FTA funding, but I want to say that's probably the time frame in terms of expectations of delivery on those projects associated with that funding.
Thank you.
Perhaps this is jumping the gun since consultants haven't been hired yet, but I would love for us to consider for these kind of urbanizing suburban corridors, ways that we might make code amendments in these overlay districts for incremental bike and ped improvements, for adaptive reuse projects, small-scale projects that might fly under the threshold in the tiered site plan process, but where nonetheless incremental improvement could really be helpful in closing those first mile, last mile gaps.
It's an interesting
suggestion.
suggestion.
It's happened a good bit, like out on Blue Ridge, where because the old rules about large scale parking, and where it was the percentage parking change that substantial reinvestment didn't trigger. But because there are so many lovely independently owned businesses out there, you're going to have to strike a balance. But there needs to be some incremental improvement so that people can get to BRT.
Yeah.
Thanks for all your work.
Yeah, thank you.
I would just make a comment. A few of us have kind of talked about before, but I would just request that we send this item to the policy committee to talk about more, most likely in our January meeting. If there's any, I don't want to cut off Commissioner Thomas, but I would just want to make that comment that I would like to bring this to policy committee so we can kind of dig deeper into some of the details of the policy around stationary planning in general, and how that relates to kind of first mile, last mile stuff, and just overall connectivity.
Thank you, Mr. Caruso. Mr.
Thank
Thomas?
you. Just very quickly, the role of the consultant, will they lead the station area planning design? Is that principally their role, or will they also be involved in any kind of outreach activities?
So station area planning and station design are two separate things.
We're at planning right now, I think.
Yeah, so station area planning is, our focus is first mile, last mile, land use and urban design considerations, and how those things get advanced through design and implementation, and also redevelopment on private property. And then your question was, what will the consultant be doing? They will lead, I would imagine we will have a team of consultants, not just a single consultant, so probably a team. So a lot of their work is the leading and generating most of the content. Most of the engagement, I would say, that is very much a team effort. I think a little heavier on the city side, because we want the relationships to stay with staff who will continue working in the community through future projects in the corridors, right? But they do help us some, and they're a good, they don't, sometimes we end up working with people who aren't actually from Raleigh, and they're kind of interesting, sort of outsider, bring a different perspective, and also let us know when we've fallen too deep into Raleigh talk. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Is there any further comment, question from the commission? Hearing none, I'd just say briefly that, Ms. Walter, I deeply appreciate, and I believe this commission deeply appreciates the work of you and your team.
Thanks.
And I also speak to that not only as a member of the commission, but as a resident who has in fact participated in some of the station area planning along New Bern Avenue. And so very much looking forward to the improvements along that corridor, looking forward to biking and walking to the businesses and, to friends and folks who live along that way. Back to Mr. Caruso's point just briefly, if we could have a member of the staff join the policy committee meeting in January 2023 for kind of further review and ultimately support of your work.
Yeah, that would be great.
I think that'd be deeply appreciated.
Yeah. Thanks for the interest in our work. Well, I really appreciate that.
Absolutely.
And the kind words, too. It's good to see all of y'all.
Great to see you. Thank you again.
Take care.
Well, my friends, up next, I believe we do have the Faircloth Street Cycle Track presentation. I like those bikes.
We need some new photos. Or new branding.
I always like their art, though.
Yes.
Hi, I'm
Good
Diana
evening.
Dedmore, and I'm new to this. I work with Central Engineering Services, and this cycle track is in the very preliminary stages. We're just kind of introducing it to you now while we're still in the design phase to get input and feedback. It is for the connectivity to the Reedy Creek Trail. And of course, if you're familiar with this cycle track from Sullivan, on Gorman Street from Sullivan to Hillsborough Street, it also will connect that from Hillsborough Street to Wade Avenue on Faircloth. So, of course, I just went over the scope of the project. Here's Faircloth, and currently it has bike lanes on either side of the road. So the goal is to shift the 2 lanes to the west side of the road adjacent to the Meredith College property. And of course, we'll connect from Hillsborough to Wade. This is our preliminary scope. Right now, we're still in preliminary design. Hopefully, design will be ready, complete by February next year, and then the initial review in the spring of next year. Some with final design, and then bidding and construction by fall of next year. This is the basic template or typical section with a 10-foot bike lane there adjacent to the Meredith College property. It will be from the edge of pavement out. So they'll have 2 5-foot bike lanes, a 3-foot buffer. Because of drainage, we are looking at right now a painted buffer with the plastic bollards, and then 10-foot lanes narrowing the road, hopefully, or narrowing those lanes, hopefully slowing traffic down through this area as well. And these are our design considerations, the transition points there at Hillsborough Street, Clark Avenue, Wade Avenue, Brookwood Drive, which is there at the back entrance to the Meredith College property, and then our storm drainage and transit stops. We haven't gotten confirmation yet that the bus stop there at the back of the Meredith property has been switched. The Meredith had requested for that bus stop to be moved to Wade Avenue, and we haven't gotten the confirmation yet, but from the DXX and the DRX route, it's no longer showing a stop there. So this would no longer, then impede the cyclist.
So the current stop is actually on Faircloth itself?
It was, yes. We're hoping it has been moved. Right now, what the plans are showing, what is called like a floating, if it's cost effective, a floating bus pad that the cyclist then would yield to any pedestrians that would be entering the bus at that point, and then it could easily be removed once the bus stop is fully transitioned over to Wade Avenue. But we haven't gotten confirmation yet. As soon as we get confirmation, that can easily be taken off the plans. And so we would like to turn it over to y'all for any recommendations or design considerations. We have a full set of plans if you would like to go through those. Yes.
And
you do.
I'm just going to add, I asked Diana to come tonight with the thinking that we are still internally working through a lot of those considerations. And so we would like to be able to come back to the planning committee in January when we return from holiday season and talk through some of those challenges that we're facing with the drainage and with those transitions. So I think for today, Diana can give you guys an overview, but I don't think we'll spend too much time diving into the details because this is very preliminary. We will have worked through some of those challenges with some ideas to bring to the planning committee in January.
Thank you. Thank you. Ms. Gallenbeck?
Yes, thanks. Thank you for pointing that out. What I wanted to comment on is the need for us to have a turning lane on that section of road. And if we don't need to have the middle turning lane, would that enable us to have wider cycle lane? Because what I know is that the 5-foot wide cycle path in one direction is not wide enough for side-by-side cycling. Not wide enough for parent-child or two friends to cycle together in that capacity.
So I do think, and Diana, chime in and correct me if I'm wrong on this, one thing we've heard from the residents along there is they're very happy about having the turning lane for when they're trying to get in and out of their driveways. There's some concern from them because there's a bike lane on the residential side that's serving as a buffer. With what we're installing, we're actually pushing the vehicle travel towards their houses.
Mm-hmm.
They are not thrilled about that, but they are happy about having the turning lane when they're trying to access their driveways. So that's just one thing I'd be cautious of if we were to take that away. I think there would be a lot of frustration from the residents there.
A lot of frustration?
Or some frustration.
There are several driveways on that side, as well as 3 intersections, or 4, I believe, on that side that do constitute the center turn lane.
And the volume of traffic would cause them to wait too long for them to pull into their driveway?
It's not.
Or is it about getting out of their driveway?
It's about stacking up traffic to Wade Avenue. If they are stopping traffic on on Faircloth, if they're traveling south, then the traffic would stack up and could potentially back up onto Wade Avenue.
Oh,
waiting for cars to turn. It's
now.
not so much that they're worried about backing up traffic. We're more worried about the congestion that it could create behind them.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Any further comment or question from the commission? Oh, Ms. Stern? Oh, absolutely. We're going to turn over to Ms. Stern real quick.
Thanks. Just as a former very frequent rider of the CRX and DRX, it seems strange to me to move those bus stops to Wade, just because it is buses kind of pull over and wait, and also accessing the bus on Faircloth is much easier and sort of less scary than having to get onto Wade, especially if you're riding your bike to the bus. Anyway, this is kind of, I think, sort of a separate topic from what you are presenting to us today, but it seems strange to me to move bus stops from Faircloth, which is a much calmer road, than onto Wade, which is...
My understanding, this was a request actually from Meredith College because the Wade Avenue access is closer to their dorms. So the students just have to walk out of their dorms towards Wade Avenue. There is not a sidewalk access for their students on that back drive, and it is narrow. There, with the gates and the decorative fencing they have, there is no, it's too narrow to, to fit in a sidewalk for their students. So to my understanding, it was a request from Meredith College, not the city.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, it just seems like if part of the concern for reconfiguration is keeping some of the backup traffic off of Wade, putting the bus stops on Wade seems counter.
Right. It would be there at the Wade Avenue Ridge Road intersection.
Okay.
And just to clarify, it is a Go Triangle stop. It's not a city-controlled stop, so it's not one that the city's moving. They had already had plans to move it. We're just trying to figure out whether or not they're moving forward with those, that move in order to make sure we're planning for what is going to be there.
Thank you. Ms. Clark?
I'm just curious from a Greenway perspective on the redundancy of this cycle path, because if you're at the intersection of Hillsborough and Faircloth, if you're trying to get to the Art Museum, it's essentially a square, and the Greenway goes up to 440 and then across, and this is a similar, just the other side of the square. And so that's one question of all the places to put a cycle track. This does seem to have Greenway redundancy, but this is only my second meeting, so I don't really know the history. The other question is, when they were detouring.
Ms. Clark, can you do me a favor? Would you use the microphone next to you?
Sorry.
Thank you.
The second question is, when they had the detour of the Greenway earlier in the year due to the 440 construction, I watched how cyclists came on and came down on the shopping center side of Wade Avenue instead of crossing at Ridge Road and coming down the Meredith side. And the path is wider on the Meredith side. There's actually a traffic light to cross Wade Avenue with a light at that section. And so I just want to be sure, if you have the Faircloth, that you encourage people to go on up Wade Avenue on that path. It has finally been cleared. For a long time it was so overgrown that it was uninviting. But you don't want people crossing at that shopping center and Wade Avenue because there's there's a crosswalk on the other side of the intersection. So just a couple of things from my perspective.
Thank you. Fontaine?
To speak to your first question about the redundancy, I think our perspective is looking at this from a transportation system network, and with the fact that the greenways close and access gets shut off through Meredith College, having something that is available for commuters to use at all hours of the day, not just when the greenway is open, is important to us.
That makes sense.
Thank you. Mr. Caruso?
Just a question of whether or not 10 is low as you can go on the lane widths. There's wiggle room there.
Do you want a response to that?
I think it was more.
No, I know this is going to.
I think this was more of a rhetorical question.
It's going to planning committee. And
That's right.
Just putting that little thought in your brain.
It's on the radar. Thank you, Ms. Allen.
And so
partly to the point previously, on the Wade Avenue side, it is, and maybe this is partly where there's still a lot of uncertainty, but is the plan to bring this all the way to the Wade Avenue? Because I know, like, currently there's the lanes and it drops down to Sharrows because there's a double left turn. So is the idea to drop a turn lane and actually bring the cycle track all the way to the intersection?
Yes,
No,
Yeah,
yes,
we're
okay.
not dropping it.
Okay.
We're going to the,
right.
So there's still the turn lanes and the cycle track?
I'm sorry, but there will be,
it would ramp up out of the road.
Into the, into that path that's there?
Like a curve.
right. We're not affecting the storage lanes there at the intersection
Okay.
due to the traffic.
But there is enough, I guess my concern is that there's enough space for that to, for the cycle track to continue.
Right. Once
not
you
like
pass
have a
the
Sharrow
Meredith
or
College.
something?
I'm sorry. Yep. Once we pass Meredith College, we'll transition back behind the curb and gutter here, and then the slide is up to, if you can see the slide, we'll transition from the road up to behind the curb and gutter, the track will, and then we'll connect there at the Wade Avenue intersection.
Okay.
The slide is up. Can you see?
Yeah, I guess.
Oh, I'm sorry. Do you want me? Can I zoom in or no?
I think I get the idea. Yeah. And,
So right here, this is the Meredith College driveway, and once the cyclists pass, it'll transition behind the curb and gutter.
Oh,
And then
I see.
Then here, this is your Wade Avenue intersection. We'll tie in here to the existing
The existing
concrete
path
ramp,
there. Okay.
and then they can continue on.
Yeah. And just, I guess, to add some additional context to the question about redundancy, I don't remember where, but I know that we've heard commentary from Meredith College that basically is requesting us to, because the current path, I believe, goes through their property, and there's been commentary from them that they basically want to prevent that so that they can secure their facility overnight and things like that. So I think that's partly driving this.
Ms. Alley?
Curious I don't know if this is within the scope of work, but looking at kind of small but meaningful changes we might make to the intersection itself. I'm presuming that Wade Ave is NCDOT facility, but taking a cue from the work y'all are doing downtown with the LPIs, seems like a place where it might not be an automatic LPI, but there's such strong turn movement at this intersection that crossing it in anything other than a car, actually even in a car, is pretty harrying. So wondering if we might be able to give a bit of a head start to our friends not in cars in the intersection. Even if that's just the north-south crossing, or yeah, I'm not sure what the details are there, but it's not a fun road to traverse.
We can be in touch with our signal folks and see what.
Even if it's, I don't know if downtown that there are no big buttons, right? It's automatic. So I know that I'm guessing this one has a PED activator. I don't know if there's ever PED activated LPIs, but I think that would be interesting. You really need a head start on this intersection because there's so much turn movement.
Yeah, I mean, to add to that point, I mean, I think one thing that would be very beneficial to look at as part of this project is the turning radius, especially on that corner where you turn
really
south
go
onto
fast.
Faircloth, because people just fly through that right turn if it's free and coming off the interstate. That turning movement is very fast. So if we can look at squaring off that turn, turning from east to south onto Faircloth, I think that would definitely improve the safety substantially.
Thank you. Ms. Gellenbeck?
Yes, I think it might be a really good time to also address how in the past we've had residents from the Ridge Road residency or community talk about the bike lanes on Ridge Road. And this will be a really nice connection that we're making from the Ridge Road bike lanes to the Faircloth Cycle and the Greenway connection, East Coast Greenway connection as well. I think we're really at the cusp of building a network. And so I really would like to stress that, and making sure that those Ridge Road bike lanes are protected, available, open for all ages and abilities, so that we can really make that constant connection. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gellenbeck. Well, hearing no further comment from the commission, I do want to thank Ms. Is it Deedmore?
Deadmore. Yes.
Deadmore, Ms. Deadmore, thank you so much for the presentation.
Thank you.
If I'm not mistaken, we're going to send this item to Commissioner Tong's Planning Committee in January 2023. Does that sound good to you, Mr. Tong?
Yep, can take that on whenever designs are ready.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Well, we look forward to supporting you in your continued work, Ms. Deadmore.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Up next, my friends, is our last, but certainly not our least, presentation on the Wakefield Small Area Plan. Oh, and is that Miss Barbara Godwin up to present?
It is.
Oh, that's a nice surprise.
I'm gonna have to change over there, actually.
Well, you take your time. Looking forward to having Miss Godwin present to us this evening on the Wakefield Small Area Plan.
All right, well, good evening again, everyone. So tonight I'm going to be giving you a brief overview of the Wakefield Small Area Study. This area study is a section in North Raleigh between the Neuse River and Capitol Boulevard, and is heavily concentrated there along Falls of Neuse Road, which you can see in the map on your screen. So just to give you a little bit of background on where this originated from, in June 2019, City Council requested that staff conduct this study. April through September of 2021, there was heavy community engagement with the Wakefield area, gave staff and the consultant some time to really understand the existing issues and concerns of the community in this area. And then the final report was complete in August of this year. And I will note that the final report is available in your agenda packet. That is the executive summary, so it's not the entire report, but the entire report is available online in your agenda. So to get into some of the transportation improvements that came out of this study, we have 3 buckets that kind of describe what those recommendations are. So improving on-road bike connectivity, enhancing crossing time for pedestrians, and improving the overall pedestrian experience, and then finally improving on-road greenway connections. So to get into the on-road bike connectivity recommendations, the study recommended establishing signed bikeways along neighborhood streets that you see listed here below. Additionally, the map on the right side of the screen shows these recommendations in the dotted red line. This map is available in the study if you would like a closer look as well. And then additionally, the plan recommends establishing separated bike lanes reflective of those that are listed here below as well. So here we have a section of Common Oaks Drive to give you kind of a frame of reference for what these recommended projects look like in existing conditions, and also what the proposed recommendations would be. I will note that there are some sections of Common Oaks Drive that do not look like this. They were completed as a part of a resurfacing project a few years ago, and actually have a separated bike facility, or excuse me, a buffered bike facility on that corridor in the middle section. Sections closest to the southern and northern end are not complete yet. But you can see that the proposed condition here shows trimming down the travel lane and then adding those buffered bike lanes on either side of Common Oaks. So kind of moving through those transportation recommendations, we have some recommendations around pedestrian improvements. So essentially along Wakefield Pines Drive and Falls of Noose Road, the study recommended installing high-quality intersections along both of those corridors. To get into some of the specific projects, there are improvements around the intersection at Wakefield High School and Wakefield Middle School along Wakefield Pines Drive. And then there's also a recommendation to add a mid-block crossing to Falls of Noose Road that would essentially connect into a multi-use path. And then moving into our on-road greenway connection recommendations. So this kind of gives you some policy guidance around new development as the Wakefield area continues to grow and expand, and essentially just guides new development to incorporate bike and pedestrian friendly design into their site accessibility that could connect to those on-road greenway connections. So some examples of how this could turn into a project are through establishing a new side path or multi-use path along Falls of Noose Road and additionally Wakefield Pines Drive. And so here we have an example of the existing condition on Falls of Noose Road at the top. You can see it's a 4-lane divided with the recommendation on the bottom half of the screen suggesting a multi-use path within the median of that section. The proposed multi-use path that you see would essentially connect the Noose River Greenway to Wakefield Crossing and Wakefield Commons shopping areas. So tonight we are recommending to refer this item to Planning Committee for a further review. Planning Committee meets next week on November 29th, and I will note that staff from our Planning and Development group, who is the lead on this area study, are available that night for detailed questions. And then following review by the committee, this item would be reported out at December BPAC on the 12th. And that's all I have this evening.
Thank you, Ms. Godwin. Any questions from the commission? Ms. Alley?
Just a comment that I'm not sure who controls these side streets. I'm assuming Falls of Noose is NCDOT. But I think by putting that buffered bike lane in, there's an opportunity, a new opportunity to put in street trees at back of curb. You know, it looks like there might be room in the existing condition. So cars go really fast on these roads, and as part of making it a place that people might choose not to drive, I think street trees could go a long way, both where we're putting in the buffered bike lanes, but also in that median where, you know, the section you show is lovely, but looking at the actual condition out there, I could imagine you might feel quite exposed without something really tall and vertical, giving you both shade and some buffer from the loud, fast-moving vehicles. Street trees, that's my comment. Thanks.
They are city-maintained streets.
City-maintained streets. Well, plant them up, please.
Yeah. Thank you, Commissioner Alley. We'll take that into consideration.
Mr. Caruso.
Yeah, I just have a question about the Common Oaks Drive cross-section that you showed. I just wanted to understand kind of how we determine what lane width we're using, because, for example, like on the Faircloth one that we just saw, those were proposed at 10 feet, and this is 11 with a 5-foot bike lane, and to Commissioner Gellenbach's point, we could presumably easily change it to a 6-foot lane and a 10-foot travel lane, which would not only help with the bike lane, but ideally calm traffic even further. So I'm trying to understand like how these decisions are being made and like where the differences are coming from and things like that.
Well, if you look at the street design manual and the UDO prescriptions, 11 feet really is kind of the base lane width that's prescribed there. 10 feet is one of those areas where we're starting to integrate that. So that's probably why they've got the 11 feet there, is just using that UDO as the baseline.
Okay.
Maybe as the street different, these seem like different character of streets, so I can see where 11 on Falls of Noose might seem more prudent, but certainly on the side streets, it seems like 10 would be reasonable. It's not a ton of traffic. I don't know if there's a ton of truck traffic either, or bus traffic.
Right. Yeah, it's certainly a lower volume
Yeah.
street, certainly, than Faircloth. So,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm just trying to understand, because it seems like they're very ad hoc on which, if we're 10 or 11, or, so I'm just trying to understand what.
So, I mean,
where
I think a
decisions
lot of
made.
it becomes contextual based. I do know from experience, Common Oaks, there's a lot of industrial uses that are up off that area, so the wider lane width may actually fit there. I know, but certainly I think that's a conversation and a comment that we can bring up with the planning staff.
Great.
And I will just add one difference with those is having that center turn lane does provide a little more space for those larger vehicles and like buses to traverse each other versus this one does not have that center turn lane.
Sure would make you slow down.
I have a question. Does the city consult with the schools in the immediate areas on when contemplating the active travel lanes that could accommodate their student body? Do we ever do that? Or is this something that you guys have explored?
I cannot speak to that in detail. Certainly, I do know that there are staff in the city that have been engaged with Wakefield High School and Wakefield Middle School in particular in this area. Not necessarily related to the small area plan effort, but certainly related to some of the safe routes to school assessments. But certainly, I would anticipate that the school systems would be a big stakeholder for any of these small area plans.
I would think so too.
I can't speak to how their involvement in the area plans. I do know that myself and our Vision Zero folks and our traffic engineering folks work with Jennifer Delcourt. And then she often puts us in touch with the school directly
Right.
on issues and looking at alternatives.
I was up in that area for the walk and roll international event, and I noticed the bike lanes on the roads that lead up to the school, and nobody was using them. And so, I wonder, what do they need in order for their parents to feel confident that they could use them as an alternative to getting to school, rather than always having to rely on a vehicle or the bus system, which we know that they're hurting with. So that's why it came to mind. And I noticed there were a couple of elementary schools in the map.
Thank you, Ms. Gellenbeck. Any further comment, thoughts, questions from the commission? As I understand, we are going to send this item to Planning Committee this month, in fact, next week, if I'm not mistaken. Is that correct, Ms. Godwin? And assuming that's okay with Commissioner Tong.
Yes, that's fine. Sounds like we have an agenda item.
Thinking the same.
Mr. Tong, thank you so much to you and our colleagues on the Planning Committee for taking up yet another item for further consideration. Deeply appreciate you, Ms. Godwin. I think that you are relieved. Thank you so much for your time, your energy, and your great presentation.
Thank you, everyone.
Well done, well done.
Well, my friends and colleagues, it is now time to transition to our reports. I will happily kick us off with a chair's report. Just a brief comment on the work of the last month. It has been a very active and productive month. Following our last full commission meeting, I believe on October 17th, I had the privilege of participating in Oaks and Spokes, their annual event, Crank for a Cause. I know I saw a number of commissioners out for that bike ride, which also involves some beer drinking along the way, all for a good cause, advocating for safer streets for our cycling community, our pedestrian community, all of our residents really across the community. Of course, we also had elections, and so this is probably a good time to welcome and congratulate all the folks who were newly elected. I know we've had sort of a balance, really, with this recent election cycle of folks who are returning to council, including our very own council liaison, Jonathan Melton at large. He's been reelected to serve yet again. Happy to have Council Member Melton back. In addition to Councilmember Stormy Fort, also has been elected to serve at large. We've got, of course, the mayor, Mary Ann Baldwin, who's been out there on the streets with us to cycle, here and there. And I also believe that council member, I feel like there's someone Corey Branch, our very own council member Corey Branch, who, if I'm not mistaken, was an advocate for TC 321 back in the day to help move that through I think the above curve separated protected bike lane. So thank goodness we've got council member Branch back for District C. I know some of us on this commission live out there in District C, myself included, so good to have Mr. Branch. But happy to welcome council members elect Mary Black Branch, Megan Patton, Jane Harrison, and Christina Jones. These would be districts A, B, D, and E. And, as a part of the work of, this commission, I've had the privilege of actually being out with the council members elect, getting to know them, and in fact, even touring some of our public infrastructure on bike with them. Council member elect Jane Harrison has quite kindly joined myself and former BPAC chair, now planning commissioner Dwight Otwell. We've been out together on some bike rides, touring some of our public infrastructure that could use some further improvement and investment. So I think, the bottom line is we've got a good cast and crew of thoughtful, committed residents and now elected officials joining us. And so very happy to have all of them in their continued service. In addition, the Parks Bond did pass successfully with 73% plus approval rating. So obviously, a lot of support from our community for our parks and our greenways. Very happy to see that approval, that support from our community after many months. For those of us on the campaign trail involved with that effort and that activity, deep gratitude for the support of our city on that front. In addition to support for our schools, Wake County Public Schools and Wake Tech also, those two bond programs pass as well. Had an opportunity to visit with our friends and colleagues in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Had a chance to, in fact, leverage and use their bike share program, the bike machine, getting out there with members of city staff along their Riverwalk trail, riding the bike up and down the trail and seeing the progress that the city of Tulsa has made. I'd say that Raleigh is still a few steps ahead, but God bless Tulsa, Oklahoma. It was a great visit to Tulsa, Oklahoma, and I look forward to visiting with our friends and colleagues out that way again. As some of you may know, we had, Cranksgiving, an annual food drive on bike. I know we had a number of commissioners join us, Commissioner Tammy Stern, Commissioner Brian Thomas. A handful of folks came through to support Cranksgiving. This is an event organized by Oaks and Spokes with Crank Arm Brewing in partnership with the Dix Park Conservancy to, again, food drive on bike for our friends at the Raleigh Rescue Mission. We, in fact, raised nearly 1,000 pounds of food, brought in nearly 1,000 pounds of food on bike and dropped it off with our friends at the Raleigh Rescue Mission yesterday. As it happens, yesterday was also, as some of you may know at this table, a World Remembrance Day for those who have been impacted by traffic violence. And I know that we've got members of this commission who have been personally impacted by traffic violence. And in fact, I think, if I'm not mistaken, we're right now engaged in a conversation with our colleagues on city staff to see if we can find better ways to make our commission meetings more accessible, given the spinal injuries that members of this commission have suffered because of traffic violence. I know this is a topic of conversation that, again, we're trying to explore so that all members of the commission can participate at all times while they go through, therapy and recovery moving forward. I myself have found, there have been points in time on Western Boulevard where I, was almost struck. So this is, sort of a matter of both personal and professional remembrance and concern. Then, of course, this weekend, in the context of what should be a joyous occasion after 70-plus years, with our Raleigh Christmas Parade, we had a truck apparently lose control, strike, and kill a little girl, a member of our community. I think it's human to react with this sort of mix of anger and outrage, sadness and frustration. And I think that's wholly appropriate. I think it's, again, human to react that way. But I hope we can also find the capacity to channel that energy into the work that we do, to advocate, to fight for, and to implement safer streets for all of us. That is the work of this commission. That is the work that I know all of you have signed up for. And it's a privilege to be a part of that work with you every day. Thus concludes the chair's report. Up next, we have the Planning Committee.
At the October Planning Committee, we discussed the Lake Wheeler Road project, and we went intersection by intersection with Mr. Rafi to give our comments and input. So, Fontaine, do we need to take any additional action? Okay.
Thank you, Commissioner Tom. Up next, let's hear from policy.
Yeah, so this month we kind of finalized our work on the TIA process, and we'll be delivering a report out during our next commission meeting, and then we, like we mentioned earlier tonight, we look forward to the January meeting, talking about the station area planning for BRT along our multiple corridors.
Very nice. Thank you, Mr. Caruso. As it relates to the Outreach Committee, I was in Tulsa for the committee meeting, so we decided to hold off on hosting an official committee meeting, but as it happens, we have encouraged folks publicly to participate in the Lake Wheeler Road, I think, sort of public engagement opportunities that have existed both online and in person. In addition to members of the Outreach Committee, we're able to participate in some good programs and causes, Cranksgiving and Crank for a Cause. So, outreach has been out there, okay? Let's be very clear. Just because we did not have the committee meeting, we were very, very much active and engaged. All right, up next, we have staff reports.
No report for me this evening. Happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you, Ms. Godwin. Ms. Burris?
Just a reminder that the Lake Wheeler Road, we had a open house last week. For those who've not gone to the website, there are some great images of the proposed design, a very cool virtual corridor that you can go down, and it does work with VR.
You got to check that out.
Yeah, it does work with VR glasses if anyone has some. But most importantly, there is a survey. So if you have not already, we do encourage you to participate.
Well, if I could just say briefly, I am so in love with this Lake Wheeler Road survey opportunity. I've met folks who lived in and around the Lake Wheeler area for over 2 decades, and they are very excited about the improvements that are coming, and they're very excited to participate. So as I've engaged with nearby residents, I've certainly strongly encouraged them to participate, and I hope they're following through.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Burris. Mr. Ritchie?
I will just reiterate what Fontaine just said. That open house does close on Wednesday. Certainly, we've got the comments that came out of Planning Committee, but certainly we would highly recommend that anybody go there individually, take a look at the information that's up there, and provide any comments you've got. It's the big areas that we're really looking for feedback on is kind of the separated versus combined facilities. Some of the intersection areas, really, and our goal is just from a timeline standpoint, so we will be back at council in January for that update. With the we were originally planned for December, and I think that's what Brian had mentioned when he did his presentation before. With the council turnover, we want to be able to give time to educate the council members on what they're going to be asked to do at that meeting, so we pushed that back a month.
Thank you, Mr. Ritchie. Ms. Gellenbeck?
Yeah, I do have a question regarding the outreach for the Lake Wheeler Road. Did you put any special consideration for the community just on the other side of 440 that I don't know what what their identifying name is.
Several communities, Carolina Pines.
Carolina Pines area, and to reach that community, get their feedback on that road and how they hope to use it for active transportation as well. Did you guys do any special outreach in those neighborhoods?
I don't know about the specific targeted outreach in those neighborhoods, but
Okay.
certainly we can circle back with the staff and find out.
That'd be really nice if you did. Thank you. And it was brought to my
I
attention.
do know that we did use, so the in-person meeting that we held last week was at Carolina Pines Community Center, really trying to leverage the outreach efforts that we had in that neighborhood.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, if we are now done with our staff reports, I would like to create a moment of opportunity for Ms. Beverly Clark, our liaison from the Parks, Recreation, Greenways, and Advisory Board, to share, if she would like to, a brief update.
Well, I do have something that I think would be of interest to this commission, and that is we had a staff recommendation at our advisory board meeting last Thursday regarding the Mine Creek Greenway. And to give you a refresher, this is directly south of Shelley Lake. You know, you go under the street on a wooden bridge, and then when you come across, there are two bridges that go across the creek. First bridge goes across the creek, then it goes, the greenway goes down a little bit, and then it crosses back. And those bridges are wooden, they're narrow, they're terrible visibility. The surface is extremely interrupted with tree roots, and so it's unsafe. And there is a sewer easement that goes along that's straight and would eliminate the two bridges, and then so the greenway would just stay on that, I guess, northern or western side of the creek. There is a fair amount of neighborhood resistance to that idea because it brings the greenway closer to that neighborhood. So as chair, I, having visited the site, decided that we needed to all see the site before we could make a recommendation. So we'll be, we don't have the date yet, but we will be going out there. But it is something that as active users of the Greenway that you may want to know about, because it is really a greater good issue versus the direct community that's directly next to it.
Well, Ms. Clark, just briefly, as Chair for Outreach, I would love to know when that date has been scheduled. And if possible, I'd personally like to, visit the site with you specifically.
Okay, great. Well, it's right now, and there is a replacement of the sewer line, but it's not going to be the typical sewer replacement. It's going to be a relining. But the sewer easement exists. We do not have the greenway easement. And there was a public meeting at Shelley Lake at Saratoga Arts Center back in June, and then it was presented as part of the council meeting last week, and then also as part of our board meeting. So I will let you know when the site visit is, and welcome any of you all to come and see it with us. So we will have sewer and park staff there to answer the questions too.
Thank you, Ms. Clark.
Thank you.
Well, with that, we have now reached a moment for general board comments. Do we have any general board comments? I see Commissioner Thomas.
I just have a quick question. I think some point in the past there was a possibility of a resurfacing along Avon Ferry Road between Gorman Street and I believe Athens Drive. I think that's an NCDOT control, but there was some possibility of narrowing the travel lanes and expanding the bike lanes, and I just was wondering if there's any update on that.
Yes, we have provided the drawings to NCDOT, so they have those plans. We are narrowing the travel lane and adding a buffer to the existing bike lanes. We do not have a status update on when they plan to begin that resurfacing. So I anticipate it being sometime this spring or summer.
Okay.
But they've not provided a more detailed timeline than that.
Okay. Did our plans include any kind of protected bike lane, or is it just a sort of space buffer?
Just a space buffer. We don't typically add flex posts with resurfacing projects. However, it does give us the space to go back in the future and add some if NCDOT will allow us, keeping in mind that this is a NCDOT road.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you. Any, Ms. Alley?
I wanted to, you alluded to it earlier, but I wanted to note that we have been missing some commissioners tonight and at previous meetings, and one of whom has asked for reasonable accommodations to be able to join into our meetings remotely. I know that finding a satisfactory answer on that is going to be tricky. Their city attorney's office might have something to say about it, but as a non-quasi-judicial board, I think it is really incumbent upon us to find a solution here, whether that means that we don't gavel into our session and vote on minutes. And it's not just one commissioner that's missing tonight, right? So we're missing really valuable perspectives in creating safe streets. We're missing caregivers, we're missing business owners, we're missing users of mobility aids. I think about third shift workers and all of the people that can't participate in our meetings. And when we've had a direct request from a council appointed commission member, I think it is in all of our best interest to find a suitable outcome to that. So it doesn't really sit well in my spirit, frankly, to continue to meet until we find a solution to this. My suggestion would be perhaps if we could collaborate with peer chairs of other commissions, working with perhaps our equity and inclusion office to find a suitable solution to this. Because to me, sorry, no is simply a discriminatory answer. So those are my thoughts. Thank you.
We have discussed that same issue and are asking, making a recommendation to council that it be reevaluated. As I understand it, it's not necessarily a legal issue.
Well, first of all, Ms. Alley, thank you so much for speaking up on behalf of our commissioners who could not be here tonight and who've, I think respectfully and kindly have asked for accommodation. I know that city staff has been looking into the issue, but I'm also grateful to hear from our chair, Beverly Clark, with the Parks Board. They too have been looking into this, and I hope that you know that the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Commission would certainly love to join you in advocating for greater accessibility for these commission meetings for our residents, for our public. And as it happens, I had the privilege of traveling with the director for, diversity, equity, and inclusion, Dr. Hamilton, to Tulsa. And well, let's just say, number one, we are very lucky and very fortunate to have someone so talented at the helm of that office and so thoughtful. Number two, she does enjoy a good time. Let me tell you, she is a really good dancer and just a great energy, just great energy. So bottom line is, would love to just work with our Parks Board and our staff and perhaps Dr. Hamilton's office in pursuing a solution to expanding accessibility to participating in our commission meetings.
Thank you.
Any further comment from the board? Ms. Gellenbeck?
Yes, thank you. I do want to follow suit, Commissioner Neptune, with to address the victims of, traffic road violence and deaths. I learned on Sunday from a post by Durham's Police Department that 22 members of Durham's community have been killed this year alone. And it just hurts. It hurts on a level that I think we all should just pause and take a moment to think about it, to inspire us to push forward the needs to reduce the collisions on our roads. 22 is one too many. At the start of the school year, we had a child who simply was crossing the street from his home to get to the school property and killed on the first day of school. It's wrong. And if we don't talk about it, then we can't feel it. Can't feel the pain that the community is experiencing on an issue that I think is curable. So yeah, thank you for bringing it up. With that said, I really would like to explore what the city of Raleigh is doing to build a network. Because I know that the network of active travel lanes will enable us to travel at that capacity, is using cycles, scooters, walking, in a safer manner that enables us to reach our destinations. And so I don't know if we have a plan in place. I know that we have the bicycle plan, but I really don't remember ever seeing that this is the network that we're going to build that enables people to go from point A to point B to their destinations of needs. And so my question is, do we have a network strategy in connecting the existing infrastructure that we have so that we can expedite these, the increased safety to reach the Vision Zero that the city staff or city council has asked us to achieve? So that's my question. Do we have it? And if we don't, can we?
So certainly we have guidance from the comprehensive plan and obviously through that street plan, the bicycle plan, and the pedestrian plan. And that does help provide some guidance in terms of trying to create that network. I will say that we as staff are trying to take a little bit more of a proactive approach with how we look at our capital planning in general to try and find some of those alignments. And that's not just within the transportation element of the CIP. I think the ultimate goal would be to have this collaboration across all the elements of the CIP to be able to leverage utility projects, things like that, to help find and fix some of these things, and really, from a community standpoint, be able to go into a community once and get out. So certainly that is, while I don't know that we necessarily have anything of that comprehensive nature in place right there at this minute. That is an effort that I know staff is undertaking. Certainly transportation staff is as we speak.
Right. And I understand that we have a collaborative relationship with NCDOT. And so these deaths are occurring on their roads as well. And so I really want to remind us all that we have to find that relationship with NCDOT, because what they're building is not creating a network. And there doesn't seem to be the empathy for our residents when a bike lane ends suddenly, right? It's not connecting up to our city infrastructure. And I just don't find that acceptable anymore. I'm not willing to sacrifice a family member for prioritizing motor vehicle traffic anymore. And I think everybody in this room should have that same kind of conversation when we move forward from this moment on. I just don't see anyone willing to do that. So when 5 Points study went on, and you guys had 9 different plans for that intersection, none of the plans addressed a bicycle infrastructure through that space. It was shocking to me. It was brought up I brought it up and they said, oh yeah, we can add it. Well, I don't want to bring it forward and say it's not there. I want the city staff to come forward and say it's not there before you bring it to the public. Because if the public can't see it, if the public doesn't see that we're making that priority, then they can't adjust. They can't participate in the conversation. Why are you doing it? So This is my public moment. Thank you, Commissioner Neptune.
Thank you, Ms. Gallenbeck. Mr. Caruso?
Yeah, I just had a question for staff to bring back at a later point. I remember a few months ago, well, it's been probably more than a few at this point, but there was, we heard that NCDOT had some type of safety project, broad program that they were working on that had identified the intersection of Calvary and Capitol Boulevard for funding under some type of safety project. I don't remember the name. I can try to find it and send it to you. But I just wanted to see if staff can look into that and kind of find an update to bring back on what happened with that. Because, I mean, obviously nothing has physically happened. So I'd like to know if that's what's going on with that project. Because, I mean, that is one of our highest, if not the highest, crash rate intersections in the city, and is in desperate need of some physical improvement, not just kind of signs to tell you that there's people walking around. So if staff can bring back an update on what's going on with that, that would be very helpful.
Thank you, Mr. Caruso.
Staff will look into it and report back.
Thank you, Mr. Ritchie. Well, unless there's further comment from the commission. Oh, Miss Commissioner Stern.
It's kind of a joint comment, but Commissioner Gellenbeck and I are both still very excited about, and maybe overly excited about, the little bike lane sweeper toy that was acquired a few months ago, and have an understanding that, you know, getting it around the city is sort of a hurdle at this point, but we're wondering if there could be some sort of pilot clean sweeper kind of demo to get other people excited as well, and also looking into ways that users, bike lane users, can kind of report back where they see sort of problematic areas worthy of getting the little sweeper's attention.
You've peeked at my notes for January's BPAC agenda item. More to come.
Great.
We will have some information in January.
Yeah, I'd like to piggyback off of, thank you so much for those comments, because that's excellent. We were noting the debris that's in the Crabtree Boulevard cycle lanes. And is it possible that they can be deployed now and keep those things running?
Should be extremely clean now, because as of Friday, they had just swept it.
Brilliant. This is the moment. Get the camera.
I was up there today.
Nice.
Well,
Thank
Ms.
you so much for that
Gallenbeck,
update.
We'll look to you for an update.
Oh,
on,
you know it.
It'd be interesting to see. I was on Crabtree just today using our greenway system, and there's trash everywhere. Not necessarily in the bike lane, but on the sidewalk and at back of curb, and then in sidewalks next to city property. The leaves had fallen and completely obstructed the sidewalks. It'd be interesting to see, you know, how we could, you know, sweep those bike lanes, but also look at sidewalks where it is the city's responsibility to keep them clean.
Well, Miss Alley, this might be a good, let's say, opportunity for another Greenway cleanup in partnership with our friends and colleagues with the Parks Board.
We got
It's been some
lots
months.
of spots to pick from, don't we?
Yeah. And it might be good to get out there with our own eyes and arms and, you know, a little elbow grease.
Remind your neighbors that where the leaves go, if they choose to put their leaves out for deposit. That's my annoying yearly email to my neighbors. Please keep them behind the curb, off the sidewalk.
Well, we appreciate your local advocacy.
I wouldn't say it's particularly impactful, but it's persistent.
Ms. Clark?
Well, I would like to do a joint cleanup, and we are looking at March probably for our next cleanup. So, but since we're talking about obstacles on the bike lanes, I'm pretty sure that the UDO, and of course I only ride the roads and the greenways. I don't know as much technical background as you all have on this commission. But where I assume that developers, when they block a city street, that they have to pay some fee for being able to block the city street, like Oberlin Road or Hillsborough Street. But it seems like there ought to be some provision where they pay even more when they also block a bike lane. For instance, Hillsborough Street right now is blocked, and it is very narrow, and the bike lane. So I don't know whether that's something you all can look into. It's out of our purview, but
We've covered it previously. Yeah.
You have.
Not to entirely satisfactory conclusion, but we have discussed it in the commission before.
It's something we're aware of.
Maybe with the new council, might land a little better.
Well, I'd like to, if I could, this is a really great example of how the prioritization of this infrastructure for active travel seems to be an afterthought. And if those lanes, the vehicle lanes were blocked, there would be a lot of conversations going on to unblock them. But we're not having the same kind of ferocity of protection for the active travel lanes that I think is what we need in order for us to reach Vision Zero. So thank you so much for bringing that up. And I don't take it lightly that they're blocked at all.
Mr. Thomas?
I'm just concurring with everything that is said. I don't have anything to add at the moment, but thank you for the opportunity.
I have
you.
a question, if
Thank you.
possible.
Yes, please.
Thank you. First, this is a great meeting. Thank you so much for allowing me to be a part of it. How do scooters play into the bike lanes? Because I sometimes see scooters travel in the bike lanes and also on the streets. And when they're in the bike lanes, then cyclists like myself and pedestrians are kind of nervous because they're going miles per hour, moving everyone out of the way. So how do they share the roads?
Well, as it happens, Miss Goodwin,
Yes.
we happen to have our micro mobility coordinator right here with us, Miss Barbara Godwin, who I believe can respond to that question. Now, and I'll give her just a second before she does respond. I will say I anticipate, as we see an uptick in the number of whether it's cyclists or e-bike users,
Yes.
We may continue to see sort of this gradual tension with this sort of shared infrastructure. I know that with our colleagues in larger cities like New York and elsewhere, they're already kind of coming across that tension. And so I wonder if Ms. Godwin could speak to the ways in which we're kind of monitoring the situation and perhaps some solutions that we're looking to identify.
So we do actually encourage scooter users to ride in bike lanes when available or in street when not available. A lot of times that's where they feel the safest. That being the bike lane compared to in street.
Sure.
And we do not encourage sidewalk riding due to the conflicts with pedestrians. So I understand what you're saying, and it is, kind of a part of that ongoing conversation with how we build our infrastructure, and something that we can continue to work through.
Thank you.
It's a great question.
I do have a comment now, though. Is that
Mr. Thomas?
I just want to point out that what you I think somewhat rightfully characterize as tension there, that is a reflection of demand.
Yeah.
That is a demand for active transportation infrastructure, and if we have conflicts amongst active transportation participants, we need to see that as demand, and the city needs to, I think, build accordingly, plan accordingly. So, thank you.
Here, wholeheartedly agree, Mr. Thomas. Well, hearing no further comment from the board, we shall proceed with upcoming events. Any upcoming events from the commission or from staff? If not, I do have just a couple items I'd like to make note of. First and foremost, we do have Thanksgiving coming up, and I do hope that everyone here enjoys a happy and safe Thanksgiving holiday. Beyond that, I am looking at our rescheduled December commission meeting. I think it's normally the third Monday of each month, but we are bumping up our next commission meeting to be held on Monday, December 12th. I do believe that will be a fairly abbreviated meeting. If I'm not mistaken, we'll be in fairly quickly and out fairly quickly. And in part, that works out so nicely because right now, and I'll just kind of put this on your radar, there may in fact be a bit of a holiday party that we are gearing ourselves up for, a celebration of the work of this commission, of our community. More details to come, but I would encourage you to save the date and the time frame between 7 to 9, okay? I would encourage you to take that imagination, right? It involves Cardinal Bike Share. It involves good beverages. It involves music, okay? It involves maybe some storytelling, okay? So I'm just saying, December 12th, after this commission meeting, we might be able to bike ourselves around or walk ourselves around to a holiday party, all right, that particular evening, all right. Just saying, I think you'll be able to come through and have a good time. Okay. Yes, Ms. Godwin.
I just wanted to add to that. The meeting on the 12th will be at Raleigh Union Station, conference room 206, where we have the retreat. The space was unavailable that evening, so
thank you.
do not come here.
Thank you for that update. And I should mention the holiday party, okay, after our meeting, does have a Cardinal Bike Share station right in front of it. So we could truly ride from Union Station to a location to be shared at a later date. Just got to keep you on your toes. You know what I'm saying. All right. Any further upcoming events, et cetera, from the commission? Hearing none, we have a confirmation on our next meeting. As we discussed, it'll be held at Raleigh Union Station, Monday, December 12th, 2022 at 6 p.m. Hearing no further comment, the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Commission is adjourned. Thank you.